bit because We're Alive was your last project that we spoke about.
Yeah.
And you talked about having like a big difference in like how you're making music at that time.
Yeah.
And it's crazy to hear that compared to where you're at now. But when you look back at that time, what sticks out in terms of how you're making your music?
My creative process has always been relatively similar. In that I don't overthink. I just kind of feel my songs out. But for Because We're Alive, it was an album of mine where I was surrounded by a publicist, manager, marketing expert, like a whole team, the whole shebang. And on this rollout, I really wanted to kind of hit some markets that a lot of my music hadn't hit, which required a certain level of mindfulness that far surpassed any of my other works before. And even to this day, Because We're Alive, it's about to crack like 11 million streams on Spotify. I don't know what it has on every other streaming service, but it really put me on display to parts of the industry that weren't necessarily giving me the light of day or the respect I feel I deserved as an artist. Because We're Alive was more of like a flaming, respectful middle finger to the industry, and while still giving my like day ones the type of music that I know they love and respect and deserve, which is authentic raps.
Yeah. You got a couple of lines where you say you're like the new Wayne, and I'm like 1,000,000%. Like,
right?
Yeah,
So I'm speaking it into existence, man.
No, and I think you're like, for me, what I see in your rapping style different from that time is it's almost as if you have this like continuous flow that never stops. How I compare it to, and you maybe know this because you're a runner, is have you seen those things where they make people run on that track? That's like what marathon runners run and how fast.
Yeah, totally.
That's kind of what your flow is like now. You know, marathon runners are like kind of sprinting through this whole thing.
That's a good comparison.
That's kind of what your flow is now. It's like, nah, how I started is how I'm going to finish.
Totally. It's funny you notice that, because some of my bigger influences while I was starting to release music into the world back like 9 years ago, before Spotify existed, like Bandcamp era, was Black Hippy.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like obviously Schoolboy Q, Absol, Kendrick. But yo, fucking the way Kendrick would hop on a song like, guess who's back in this motherfucker looking like a motherfucking goddamn pimp, all right? Came in the game with $1 and a dream and an AK clip with an infrared beam. Like, fam, like those types of flows, I was like, he's just not breathing. Yeah. He's just gonna not breathe. And I always had like a pretty insane lung capacity. When I started rapping, I learned that I could get a lot of words in and get a lot of bars in without having to take a breath. So it was something that I always knew I wanted to fine tune.
Yeah.
So hearing you say that unprompted at this point in my career is like, well, job well done, Dylan.
No, I honestly, I think it's obvious, because not everyone can do that. It's almost like maybe it's a musician's thing to like notice that, because the casual listener.
Totally. There's different levels, you know, like there are people who listen to music and will just hear the beat. There are some people who listen to music for lyrics. And then there are people who make music so they hear the undertones, they hear the snares. And then there are people who are strictly engineers, so they hear the levels, they hear the EQ. You know, so it depends on the ear that is taking in the sound wave. But I could tell you're a musician because you know.
Yes. And I think even myself, I always feel like, do I know what people like? Because again, like, not everyone's a musician, so I could be just pissed off, be like, this snare is trash.
This is way too loud. But then the average listener will be like, what? That song is great.
I love that, you know?
Or I'll be like, yo, that 808's clipping. Or, that's his, I'll be like, what? No one knows.